like I was sort of wasting my life away. The base pay is not even sufficient. Sometimes give me a little bit of depression. You need to actually fit your life around your schedule. Hey there, lovely souls. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Feby, and I'm here to share my stories and experiences in hopes of encouraging people to embrace their own journey and feel less alone in the process. In today's video, I want to talk about the top 5 reasons of why I think you should not join the airline as a flight attendant. And these are based on my personal experience flying as a flight stewardess with Singapore Airlines. I've actually put out a couple of videos on my flying journey, so if you're interested in checking those out, please click the links that I've put in the description box down below. Going back to today's topic, let's talk about the top 5 reasons of why I think you should not join the airline as a flight attendant. Number 1. You're exchanging time for money. The first thing that came to mind when I thought about what to share in this video is the fact that you are exchanging time for money, like literally. I know in most jobs that's what you do, but I think in the airline industry, this fact is especially true. And the reason why I say that is because even though there is a base pay, but the base pay is not even sufficient for you to survive in Singapore. I can guarantee that. The bulk of your pay actually comes from the flights that you operate. For me, when I operated a flight, I would get an hourly pay. And then number 2, depending on the flight, whether it's a turnaround or it's a layover, I would get additional allowance that actually make up the bulk of my pay at the end of every paycheck. And the other truth is there's no sick day. What it means is that you can take a sick day if you're sick, but then if you happen to be sick on the day that you need to operate a flight and you end up not being able to go for that flight, you won't be compensated. You won't get paid, because going back to what I just mentioned before, the bulk of your pay comes from when you operate a flight, and you only get paid when you actually go for your flight. Otherwise, you won't get paid. Number 2 is you have little to no control over your life. So what happens when you work as a flight attendant is you would get a schedule on a monthly basis, and there is a department who manages your schedule. At least for major airlines, this is how it typically works. And then that means that you need to actually fit your life around your schedule. Yes, you can change flights and you can try to move your schedule around, but it takes a lot to modify your schedule, and there's no guarantee that you'll be able to actually change things from the schedule that you have been given. There's also this thing called standby duties, and regardless of how senior you are or how long you've been with the company, standby duties will follow you throughout your flying life forever and ever and ever and ever. So this might mean that when you're on standby, you can't do anything, because you can get called up for flight just anytime within your standby hours, and the length of the standby period usually would take between 12 hours to 24 hours, and sometimes there's also back-to-back standby. So what that means is, let's say you have 2-day standby, and that means that you could be called up just at any time within those 48 hours period. And if you think about it, it is very tricky, because for me at that time, I felt like I was sort of wasting my life away, because I was just playing the waiting game without really knowing if I need to report for a flight or when do I need to report for a flight. And it's very tricky to plan my life during those standby days. And another thing is you have to fight to get your days off, and even though you do put in a request, there's no guarantee that you would get it. Like, I needed to submit a request and it would be processed through a ballot system, so there's no guarantee that I would get it, and I had to fight for it. And if I don't get it, that means I would have to miss important events such as my friend's weddings, my mom's birthday, or maybe like Chinese New Year or other holiday seasons. I would have to go to work instead because I wasn't able to secure the days off, and I found that to be a bit tricky. Number 3 is the long work hours and unhealthy lifestyle. So when I was working with Singapore Airlines, I would would get schedules that are mix of short, medium, and long haul flights. Even for shortest turnaround flights, it would take me at least 8 to 10 hours actually from the time I prep to go to work all the way until after we landed in Singapore. It's like a short flight, and if it's a long flight, the hours could be notoriously long. As an example, I did an ultra long range flight, and I did a couple actually, or like quite a bunch when I was still flying. As an example, I did the 17-hour flight from Singapore to New York, and 17 hours is just a flight time, does not include the reporting time, which is 2 hours before the departure time, and my prep to go for the flight. So I needed to prep 4 hours before, so it's 21 hours plus my post-landing duty. So it would be about 22 hours of work. And yes, we do get rest period on board, but it's sort of different, even though I'm super grateful for that rest period, because otherwise I don't know how I could survive, or like even other people. But at the end of the day, the work hours are still long, and it is not the same with the normal, typical 9-to-5 job that most people do. Okay, now let's talk about the unhealthy lifestyle. So first of all, when you fly, you would be in the isolated air tube for many hours. And that means that you would need to breathe the circulated air. And that's actually one of the reasons why we sometimes would feel so tired from taking a flight, because the air is not fresh and it would make us feel jaded and low on energy. And on top of that, the air is very dry too. I talked about my experience having skin rashes when I just started flying, and the reason for that was because of the dry air. Last but not least is the unhealthy onboard food. So it might not be a secret that onboard food is typically saltier than the food that we would consume on ground, because of the fact that we consume the food at a certain altitude and our taste buds would get numb to a certain extent. So imagine if you were a crew, which means that you would have onboard food available for you every day, every time you go to work, in and out. It is unhealthy to consume onboard food on a regular basis, and that is also why a lot of crew would try to mitigate this by bringing their own food or choose to skip meals, which is probably not the healthiest alternative. The fourth thing is the constant jet lag, which can be a risk to your mental health. So I remember when I was still flying, I would always feel tired like 70% of the time, and at that time I was more diligent and I exercised a lot more often than I do now, which is a good reminder that I probably should exercise more often now compared to when I was still flying. You know, when you lose sleep, like sometimes you would feel grumpy and you're just not at your best, and sometimes you're just not like yourself. And imagine if that happens on a regular basis, like it's a constant in your life. To me, I found that to be pretty challenging, honestly, to really manage my emotions and my mood regardless of how much sleep I got, and constantly trying to fight the jet lag. Let's be honest, there are certain times in the day when it is not really the best time to feel awake. Like sometimes you were just caught up in negative thoughts and rumination. Like imagine like staying awake at 2-3 a.m. in the morning when you should be asleep, and falling asleep at 10 a.m. in the morning instead. So something to think about. And I remember that those jet lags would sometimes give me a little bit of depression. Like I sometimes would feel a bit depressed and just didn't feel like myself overall, and it sort of affected the way I operated too and the way I showed up in my relationships. I didn't really like it. And last but not least is navigating the challenge and forging meaningful relationships from work. So I touched on this topic briefly in my previous video, so if you're interested in checking that out, please click the link in the description box down below. When it comes to this one reason, I find that the main thing is because a lot of people have this mindset that I'm here for a good time, not for a long time. And I think it's a fair principle or a fair mindset, considering the fact that you would always fly with different people every single time. And I think this is a pretty standard practice across major airlines, considering the amount of people that you have on the operational front. Let's be real, building relationships takes time. And Typically, when you fly as a flight attendant, you would only meet this exact people, the exact same group for that particular flight, and then you'll have to work together, and then the next time round you would be paired with different set of people. Even on the same flight, you would work with different set of people on the way up versus on the way back, as an example. There you have it, my top 5 reasons of why I think you should not join the airline as a flight attendant. That said, I'm a big believer that there's always pros and cons to everything. So in my next video, I'm going to be talking about the reasons of why I think you should join the airline as a flight attendant. So if you think that you can benefit from that video, please subscribe to my channel so that you're able to check out the video the moment I put it out at your own convenience. Thank you for watching. Thank you for spending the time with me, and I'll see you soon. Bye now.